The desert stretched as far as the eye could see. Sand dunes rose like golden waves and the heat shimmered in the distance. Tom wiped the sweat from his forehead as he leaned over a broken machine. His workshop sat at the edge of the colony, a small collection of metal walls and patched roofs that rattled whenever the desert winds howled. Tom was a mechanic. He fixed anything people brought him: broken sand crawlers, farming rigs, water pumps, or even old weapons left behind from past wars. Most people in the colony thought he was strange for living so far from the center, but Tom preferred the quiet. Machines were easier to understand than people. They had parts that fit together. If something was broken, you replaced it. If something was worn, you repaired it. Simple rules made life in the desert bearable. The morning had been quiet until Tom noticed something unusual. When he stepped outside to collect spare parts from a pile near his workshop, he saw a line of deep claw marks carved into the sand. At first he thought it was the work of a desert beast. The desert was home to all kinds of creatures, from sand serpents to the massive tunneling insects that sometimes threatened farms. But these claw marks were too large and too straight. They looked as if something heavy had dragged itself across the dunes. Tom knelt down and ran his hand across the mark. The edges were sharp and fresh, meaning whatever made them had passed by recently. His curiosity grew. He stood up and looked toward the horizon. The trail of claw marks stretched away into the desert, weaving between tall dunes. Most people would have ignored it. Most people would have turned away, fearing what they might find. But Tom was not like most people. His life had been built on solving problems, and mysteries were problems waiting for answers. Tom returned to his workshop and grabbed a small pack with tools, water, and a scanner that barely worked. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the hot desert outside. The heat alone could kill a man if he stayed too long, and storms could rise without warning. Still, something about those claw marks called to him. He started walking. The sand crunched beneath his boots and the sun burned on his back. Hours passed as he followed the strange trail. He drank from his flask and adjusted his scarf to keep the dust away from his mouth. The colony buildings shrank behind him until they were nothing more than dots on the horizon. Now it was only Tom, the sand, and the marks in the ground. The longer he walked, the more he noticed signs of struggle. Here the sand was churned up, as if something had thrashed about. There he saw dark stains, maybe oil or blood. Tom's chest tightened as a thought formed in his mind. He had heard old stories from traders, stories of creatures used by alien masters. They were said to be living machines, half flesh and half armor, bred for battle and then abandoned when no longer useful. Tom shook his head. Stories were only stories. Yet the trail ahead seemed to whisper otherwise. By the time the sun began to sink lower in the sky, Tom heard something faint. At first he thought it was the wind moving across the dunes. Then he heard it again, a deep muffled sound like a groan carried through sand. He stopped and held his breath. The sound was close. He climbed the next dune and looked down. What he saw made him freeze. In the hollow between dunes, something massive was buried in the sand. Only part of its head and one claw stuck out. The creature's scales glimmered like metal in the fading sunlight, but its movements were weak. It tried to lift its head, only for it to sink back with a low rumble that made the ground vibrate. Tom's first instinct was to run. The size of the creature alone could crush him in seconds. But he stayed rooted in place, his eyes wide with both fear and awe. The buried giant looked nothing like the beasts of the desert. Its form was shaped almost like a dragon from old earth tales, but its body shimmered as though made of living steel. The stories were true. The aliens had left one of their war beasts to die here. Tom's heart pounded as the creature's eyes flickered open. They glowed faintly, like coals under ash. For a moment man and beast stared at each other. There was no hatred in those eyes, only exhaustion. The desert wind howled as the sun dipped lower. Tom felt a choice pressing on him. He could walk away and pretend he had seen nothing. Or he could step closer to the buried creature and find out why fate had led him here. He clenched his fists. Walking away was safer, but Tom had never been the type to turn from something broken. Machines, people, or even dragons, if something could be fixed, he would try. Slowly, step by step, Tom walked down the dune toward the creature half buried in the sand. The closer Tom walked, the heavier the air seemed to feel. Every step down the dune made his boots sink deeper into the hot sand, but he did not stop. The sound of the creature's breathing reached him clearly now, deep and ragged, as if each breath cost its strength. Tom stopped a few meters away and studied the massive head lying partly above the sand. Its scales looked strange up close. They were not like the smooth plates of a lizard or the rough hide of a desert beast. Instead, each scale shone faintly, edged like pieces of armor fitted together with care. Dust and sand clung to them, but he could still see the sharp lines beneath. The creature's eyes opened again, glowing dimly in the fading light. Tom froze as they locked on him. His instincts screamed at him to back away, yet something in that gaze held him. The eyes were not wild. They were tired, almost pleading. He took a slow breath. "You're alive," he whispered, though his voice was swallowed by the desert wind. The dragon shifted slightly, and the sand slid down its side. A claw twitched, heavy and sharp, but it did not strike. Instead, the creature let out a low sound that shook the ground. It was not a roar. It was more like a groan of pain. Tom crouched near the sand and touched it. The ground was hot, but he ignored it and brushed the surface of the creature's scale. It felt both hard and warm, like heated metal. His hand trembled, but he kept it there. "You're not a monster," he said quietly. "You're trapped." As he looked around, Tom saw how bad the situation was. The dragon's body stretched far under the dunes. Most of its chest and wings were buried. Only its head and one arm claw were visible. He guessed it had been here for days, maybe longer. The sand had nearly swallowed it whole. Without help, the desert would finish the job soon. Tom's heart beat faster. He thought about turning back. The colony laws were clear. Creatures like this were forbidden. People said they were dangerous, tools of war made by alien hands. Anyone caught helping such a beast would be punished, maybe even cast out of the colony. But then Tom looked at its eyes again. They were not the eyes of a weapon. They were the eyes of a living being abandoned to suffer. He shook his head. "No, I can't leave you." The dragon blinked slowly, as if it understood. Tom stepped back and pulled the scanner from his pack. The device flickered, its screen cracked, but it hummed to life. He pointed it at the creature, and a weak signal showed its vital signs. The readings jumped and shook, but one thing was clear: the creature was alive, though barely. Its energy levels were fading fast. Tom frowned. He remembered the trader's stories. These beasts were once bound to alien masters who treated them as machines, forcing them into battles. When they failed or grew weak, they were left behind. This dragon was one of those. Left to die in the desert. He circled slowly around the exposed parts of its body, searching for injuries. He found several cracks along its armored scales, places where strange liquid had leaked out and dried dark against the sand. The claw that stuck out twitched weakly. Each movement seemed to drain what little strength it had left. Tom rubbed his chin. "You're not going to last long like this," he muttered. "If I leave you here, you'll be gone by sunrise." The thought made his chest tighten. He had spent his life fixing things people discarded. Machines that others thought were beyond repair often found a second life in his hands. To him, this dragon was no different. Except this time, the broken thing breathed. The dragon let out another low sound, softer than before. It was almost like a sigh. Tom took a step closer and spoke firmly. "I'll help you. I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way." The creature's glowing eyes blinked once, slowly, as if it understood. Tom set down his pack and began working. He pulled out cables, a portable torch, and other tools. His first goal was simple: free the dragon from the sand. He stabbed the torch into the ground, heating and loosening the packed dunes. Then he used the cables to tie sections of the buried sand, hooking them to a small engine he carried for repairs. The engine groaned, pulling chunks of hardened sand away. Hours passed. The desert grew darker, the sun sinking below the horizon. Stars began to appear overhead, shining bright in the cold night sky. Tom's back ached, and his hands were raw from digging, but he kept going. Every time he stopped, he would look at the dragon's eyes and see the faint glow waiting for him to continue. Finally, after long effort, more of the creature's chest was exposed. The dragon tried to move, lifting its head slightly higher than before. A rumble escaped its throat. This time it was not pain. It was closer to gratitude. Tom sank to his knees, breathing hard. His clothes were soaked with sweat, and sand clung to every part of him. But a small smile formed on his face. "We're not done yet," he whispered. "But you're not alone anymore." The desert wind carried his words away, but the dragon's eyes remained fixed on him. For the first time, Tom felt that he had not just found a broken creature. He had found a companion waiting for someone to care. And he had made his choice. He would not leave until the dragon was free. The night stretched long over the desert, and the stars burned bright above. Tom sat on the sand, resting his tired arms. He had dug for hours, yet the dragon was still trapped. Its chest and part of its wings were now uncovered, but much of its massive body remained buried. Every so often, the creature let out a deep sound, half groan, half breath, reminding Tom that time was short. Tom leaned against his pack and stared at the giant. "I can't do this with my hands alone," he muttered. His fingers were raw from the digging, and his back ached from lifting heavy loads of sand. He needed more strength, more tools. The dragon's eyes flickered open again. Even in the dim light, Tom could see the faint glow inside them. It was watching him, waiting for what he would do next. He pulled out his small tool scanner and studied the half-exposed body. The readings confirmed what he feared: the creature was weak and running out of energy. It had wounds along its side where the strange fluid had leaked, and its breathing was shallow. Tom knew if he left it until morning, the heat would finish the job. He clenched his fists. Walking away was still an option. He could return to his workshop, pretend he had seen nothing, and no one would ever know. But his chest tightened at the thought. Leaving a living being to die in the sand was not something he could do. Tom stood up. "All right," he said firmly. "I'll get you out." He rummaged through his pack and pulled out a set of cables, gears, and a small engine rig. It was something he had built from spare parts to move heavy machines back in his workshop. It wasn't designed for something this large, but it was all he had. First, he hammered long rods into the sand around the dragon, tying cables to them. Then he hooked the other ends to the engine rig. The device roared weakly when he powered it up, shaking as the gears pulled tight. Slowly, the cables began to drag chunks of sand away from the dragon's body. The creature groaned as parts of its wing shifted under the pull. Tom stopped and hurried to its side. "Easy," he said softly, though he wasn't sure the dragon understood. "I'm not trying to hurt you." The glowing eyes blinked once, slowly. Tom took that as a sign to continue. He worked through the night, guiding the engine, digging where the machine could not reach, and loosening the hardened sand. Every hour drained his strength, but he kept moving. His breath turned into steam in the cold desert night, and his hands grew numb, but he did not give up. The dragon did its part too. Whenever Tom freed a section, the creature would give a weak push with its claws or shift its body just enough to break the sand's hold. Slowly, inch by inch, it began to rise. By dawn, Tom's arms felt like lead, and his throat was dry as stone. The first light of morning touched the desert, painting the dunes gold. Tom stepped back, wiping sweat from his face, and stared at his work. The dragon was no longer buried completely. Its chest, wings, and both front claws were free. Its head lifted higher now, casting a shadow over Tom. The creature gave a long exhale, and sand scattered from its scales. Tom smiled faintly. "You're getting there," he said hoarsely. "We'll have you standing soon." The dragon's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and it made a deep sound that was softer than before. Tom could not understand the meaning, but he felt it carried something more than pain. Perhaps it was trust. He collapsed onto the sand, too tired to move. Yet his mind was restless. Helping this creature was more than just fixing a broken machine. It was a choice against the colony's rules, against common sense. If anyone found out, they would see him as reckless or even dangerous. But Tom could not bring himself to regret it. Machines had taught him one thing: every part had value, and nothing should be thrown away without reason. This dragon had been discarded, but it was not beyond repair. It was alive, and that was reason enough to fight for it. As the sun rose higher, Tom forced himself to stand again. He went to his pack, pulled out tools, and began inspecting the cracks in the dragon's armor like scales. He cleaned away the dried liquid and sealed what he could with repair gel, the same kind he used on farming rigs. It was not perfect, but it would keep the creature from losing more strength. Hours passed again. The desert grew hotter, and Tom's energy faded, yet he kept going. The dragon lay still, watching him, its breathing deeper now. Slowly, the glow in its eyes grew stronger. By the time the sun reached its peak, Tom was exhausted beyond words. His body demanded rest, but he stood tall and looked at the dragon with pride. "You're still alive," he said with a tired smile. "That's all that matters." The dragon lowered its head, almost as if bowing to him. Tom froze at the gesture, then let out a shaky laugh. He had never thought a creature like this could show such a thing. For the first time, he felt the bond forming. Not between man and machine, but between two beings who refused to give up. Tom knew the path ahead would not be easy. The colony, the desert, and the dragon's past all stood in their way. But in that moment, under the burning desert sun, Tom had made his choice. He would not leave the dragon behind. The desert sun blazed down with merciless heat. Tom squinted against the light as he guided the dragon toward his workshop. Moving the creature had been harder than freeing it from the sand, but he managed with patience and clever use of his machines. He had set up a rolling rig of old crawler wheels and cables, attaching them to parts of the dragon's body. The beast was too weak to walk far, but it had tried to rise, stumbling and dragging itself across the dunes. Tom walked beside it, sweating and struggling with the controls of his patched machines. Every time the dragon faltered, he tightened the cables and encouraged it with his voice. "Come on. Just a little farther. You can do this." The creature's heavy breaths shook the ground, but it kept moving. Its eyes glowed faintly, fixed on Tom as if drawing strength from him. Hours passed before they finally reached the small cluster of metal walls and tools that made up Tom's workshop. Tom collapsed in the sand, panting. "We made it," he whispered, half to himself and half to the dragon. The dragon lowered its head and rested near the workshop's shadow. Its wings stretched slightly, sand falling from the scales like grains of glass. For the first time, it looked less like a weapon of war and more like a wounded traveler seeking shelter. Tom dragged himself to his feet and gathered supplies. He brought out water tanks, repair gels, and the strongest tools he owned. He had never worked on something alive before, at least not like this. Yet he treated the dragon's body as he would a broken machine with care, attention, and patience. He cleaned the cracks along its scales, pouring water over them to wash away dust and dried liquid. The dragon shuddered but did not resist. Instead, it lay still, its glowing eyes following his every movement. "You trust me now," Tom said quietly. "That makes us partners." He used his welding torch in careful bursts, sealing broken edges of the creature's biometal armor. Where the wounds ran deep, he packed them with gel that hardened like steel when cooled. His hands shook at times, but his focus never broke. The dragon let out low sounds, some of discomfort, some of relief. Tom listened carefully, adjusting his work whenever the creature reacted. By nightfall, the worst of the wounds were closed. The dragon lifted its head higher, taking a deep breath that echoed like distant thunder. Its eyes glowed brighter than before, reflecting the starlight above. Tom sat back, wiping grease and sweat from his face. "There," he said. "Not perfect, but you'll live." The dragon tilted its head, studying him. Then it made a soft rumble, low and steady, unlike the pained groans from before. Tom froze, unsure at first, then laughed quietly. That sounded almost thankful. He leaned against a metal wall, too tired to move, and stared at the stars. For years, he had worked alone, surrounded only by machines and sand. But now, sitting beside a living dragon, he felt something different. The desert did not feel empty anymore. In the following days, Tom and the dragon settled into a rhythm. Tom fed it water mixed with minerals to restore strength. He worked on repairing sections of its armor like hide. He adjusted his machines to help the dragon stretch its wings slowly, testing their movement. Each day, the creature grew stronger. One morning, as the sun rose, Tom decided it needed a name. He studied the shimmer of its gray scales, which caught the light like ash carried on the wind. "I'll call you Ash," he said. "It suits you." The dragon blinked, the glow in its eyes steady. Tom smiled. "Ash it is, then." From that moment, the name stuck. When Tom spoke it, the dragon would lift its head or rumble softly in response. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Tom no longer saw Ash as a weapon or a beast. He saw a companion, one who understood silence as well as he did. But peace in the desert never lasted long. One evening, a trader stopped by Tom's workshop, bringing spare parts in exchange for water. The man glanced nervously at the giant form resting in the shadows. "That thing's dangerous," the trader whispered. "If the colony finds out, they'll come for you both." Tom's jaw tightened. "It's not a thing. His name is Ash." The trader shook his head. "Call it what you want. But those beasts belong to the alien masters. They don't forget what's theirs." Tom watched the trader leave, unease growing in his chest. He knew the man was right. The colony would never accept Ash. To them, he was only a war creature abandoned in the sand. That night, as Tom worked on polishing the dragon's wing joints, Ash raised its head and looked toward the horizon. Its eyes glowed brighter, as if it sensed something far away. Tom followed its gaze but saw only darkness beyond the dunes. A cold thought entered his mind. If Ash's owners returned, they would try to take him back. And Tom doubted they would care what happened to him in the process. Still, when Ash lowered its head beside him and let out a soft, steady rumble, Tom felt his fear fade. Whatever came, he would stand with the dragon. They had survived the desert together. That bond was worth more than any law or threat. The desert winds were calm that morning. Tom stood outside his workshop, tightening bolts on an old crawler engine while Ash rested nearby. The dragon's wings stretched wider each day, catching the sunlight like polished silver gray plates. Tom had grown used to the rumble of its breathing, a steady sound that gave him comfort. For the first time in years, his workshop did not feel lonely. But peace in the desert was always fragile. Tom heard it before he saw it, a faint hum in the distance. He raised his head and squinted toward the horizon. A group of lights shimmered above the dunes, moving fast. They were not traders. They were ships. Ash's eyes snapped open. The dragon lifted its head and let out a deep growl. Its gaze locked on the approaching lights. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. "You know who they are, don't you?" he murmured. The ships descended with a roar, kicking up storms of sand. 3 sleek craft, shaped like blades, circled the workshop and landed in the open desert. Their black hulls bore markings Tom did not recognize, but the way Ash tensed told him everything. These were the ones who had left the dragon to die. The ships opened, and tall figures stepped out. Their armor gleamed, their movements sharp. They were not human. Their bodies were long and lean, their skin pale under the desert sun. In their hands, they carried weapons shaped like rods that pulsed with light. One of them stepped forward. His voice was cold and clear. "You there, human. You have something that belongs to us." He pointed at Ash, who bared his teeth with a low snarl. Tom's jaw tightened. "He doesn't belong to anyone. You left him to die." The alien tilted his head, almost amused. "That creature was ours to command. It failed us. We cast it into the desert as punishment. It should have perished. Yet here it is, standing at your side." His voice hardened. "Return it, or suffer the same fate." Ash let out a roar that shook the ground, wings spreading wide. The aliens raised their weapons, but Tom stepped forward before things could break into violence. "No," he said firmly. "He's not your tool anymore. He's alive. He chose to survive. And I chose to help him." The aliens laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the sand. "You speak of choice, human. That thing has no choice. It was built for battle. It exists to serve. Without us, it is nothing." Tom shook his head. "You're wrong. He is more than what you made him. I've seen it in his eyes. He's not a weapon. He's a friend. The lead alien's smile vanished. Then you are a fool. And fools must be taught their place. He raised his hand, and his soldiers stepped forward, weapons glowing. Ash growled, his claws digging into the sand, ready to strike. Tom's heart pounded, but he held his ground. He knew he could not fight them with strength alone. His machines were small, his weapons weak. But he had something the aliens did not: Ash's trust. Tom spoke quietly, just loud enough for the dragon to hear. We stand together. No matter what. Ash's eyes glowed brighter, the light pulsing with energy. The dragon lowered its head close to Tom, almost brushing him with its metallic scales, then turned to face the aliens fully. The air around them grew heavy as the desert wind rose, swirling sand into the air. The aliens hesitated, studying the human and dragon side by side. One of them spat words in their tongue, sharp and quick, and the leader gave a short nod. Very well, he said coldly. If you wish to keep our beast, then you will share its fate. We will return, and when we do, your desert will burn. They retreated to their ships, their weapons still glowing but unused. Within moments, the crafts roared back into the sky, leaving a storm of sand behind them. Tom coughed and shielded his face until the wind settled. When he lowered his arm, the ships were gone. The desert was silent again, but the silence felt heavier than before. Ash lowered his head beside Tom, rumbling softly. The dragon's eyes held a question, as if asking what would come next. Tom placed his hand against the warm scales. They'll come back. I know it. But they won't take you. Not while I'm here. The dragon blinked slowly, the glow steady. Tom felt the bond between them deepen, stronger than before. The aliens saw Ash as a tool, but Tom saw something greater. Together, they had a chance to prove the truth. He turned toward his workshop, determination burning inside him. If the aliens returned, they would not face a lonely mechanic and a wounded dragon. They would face partners who trusted each other, ready to fight not just for survival, but for freedom. The desert wind carried his words as he whispered, they'll learn that you're not theirs anymore. You're Ash. And you're mine to protect, just as I am yours. The desert sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Tom stood outside his workshop, studying the horizon. The wind had begun to pick up, swirling sand around their small shelter. Ash's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the last light of day. Tom knew the aliens would return. It was only a matter of time. He wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his makeshift weapons. Most were old machines repurposed from his workshop, metal rods, cables, and a few energy pulses that could stun or disable small vehicles. Against the aliens' ships, these were weak, but Tom had faith in one thing: teamwork. Ash and he had survived the desert together. Together, they could face anything. The dragon shifted, lowering its head to the sand and rumbling softly. Tom patted its scales. It's time, he said. We face them together. Hours passed in tense silence. Then, just as the sky turned deep orange and red, the hum of engines reached them. The aliens were back. 3 black ships hovered over the dunes, their lights sharp and bright. Ash rose, stretching his massive wings, sending sand flying in every direction. The dragon's roar rolled across the desert, echoing against the distant rocks. The alien ships landed with precision. Tall figures emerged, weapons in hand. Their leader stepped forward, voice cold. You dare to defy us again, human? Hand over the creature now, or be destroyed. Tom shook his head. No. He's not a weapon. He's alive. And he chooses to fight for himself. The aliens raised their weapons. Energy beams pulsed as they aimed at Tom and Ash. The desert light flickered with the power of their weapons. Tom shouted, "Now, Ash!" The dragon leapt forward, wings stretching wide. He released a burst of energy from his chest, a shock wave that threw the first alien off balance. Sand flew into the air, blinding the others momentarily. Tom activated his rig, sending a net of cables over the landing site. The cables snagged two of the aliens' weapons, pulling them from their hands. The aliens recovered quickly, firing beams toward Ash. He dodged with surprising speed, wings lifting him off the ground, casting shadows over the dunes. Each movement was calculated. Tom ran alongside him, using his machines to throw sand and create barriers between them and the attackers. Ash roared, sending another pulse through the desert. The energy slammed into the alien soldiers, forcing them to retreat a few steps. Tom saw the leader adjusting his weapon, readying a stronger attack. "You cannot win," the alien hissed. "This creature is ours." Tom stood his ground, gripping a metal rod wired to a small energy coil. "He's not yours. And you will learn that life is stronger than control." Ash surged forward, powerful and fast, wings slicing the air. He knocked one of the aliens back with a sweep of his tail. The sand whipped around them, hiding Tom's movements. He darted forward, tossing energized rods to jam the aliens' weapons. Each strike disrupted their aim. The desert became a storm of sand, light, and sound. The aliens fired relentlessly, but Ash moved with incredible speed and strength, protecting Tom and striking at their formations. Together, they worked in sync. Tom's machines covered the dragon's flanks, while Ash's power and size kept the aliens from advancing. Finally, the lead alien aimed a beam at Tom directly. Ash leapt between them, shielding him with his massive wings. The energy struck the scales and ricocheted, sending the alien stumbling backward. Tom seized the moment, activating a cable from his rig that wrapped around the leader's legs, pulling him to the ground. The remaining aliens glanced at each other and saw the tide of battle turning. Their formation was broken. With a final glance at Ash, who glared down at them, they retreated to their ships. In moments, they were gone, engines humming as they disappeared over the dunes. The desert fell silent again. Tom sank to the sand, exhausted, and looked at Ash. The dragon lowered his head, breathing deeply. The glow in his eyes was softer now, almost like relief. Tom laughed quietly, wiping sweat and sand from his face. "We did it, Ash. We really did it." Ash rumbled, a low sound that shook the ground. Tom placed his hand against the warm scales. "You're free now. Not theirs anymore. And you'll always have me by your side." As the sun set behind the distant dunes, the two companions stood together, victorious. The desert had tested them, and they had survived. Their bond was stronger than ever. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The desert was quiet after the battle. Tom and Ash stood side by side on the highest dune, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The golden light spilled across the sand, turning it into a sea of fire and silver. For the first time since the dragon had appeared in the desert, Tom felt calm. The threat of the aliens had passed, at least for now, and Ash's scales shone brighter under the morning sun. Tom stretched, his muscles aching from days of digging, fighting, and repairing. Yet the exhaustion was different this time. It was the kind that came after victory, after knowing that what he had done mattered. He reached out to touch Ash's massive head. The dragon leaned down, letting Tom place a hand against the smooth, warm armor of his scales. "You're alive, Ash," Tom said quietly. "And you'll stay alive. We'll make sure of it." The dragon rumbled softly, a sound that felt like both agreement and comfort. They had been through fire and sand together. They had faced danger and fear. And now, for the first time, they were free. Back at the workshop, Tom began to make small improvements. He had learned much from the battle. Old machines could be repurposed, simple tools could be used in clever ways, and the bond between human and dragon could achieve what no machine alone ever could. He repaired the rig they had used to drag Ash from the desert and strengthened it so that it could also help the dragon train and move more easily. Ash watched quietly, following Tom's movements with those glowing eyes that reflected curiosity and intelligence. He tested his wings carefully, flapping them against the desert wind. Tom cheered quietly as the dragon lifted slightly into the air, just a few inches, but enough to show he was regaining strength. Days passed. Tom and Ash learned to communicate in small ways. Tom would point toward distant dunes, and Ash would respond with a tilt of the head or a flap of his wings. Simple gestures became their language. They explored the desert together, Tom riding on Ash's back when the sand was too hot or the distances too far. The colony slowly began to notice them. Traders who came to Tom's workshop no longer whispered warnings. They saw Ash as a protector rather than a threat. When sandstorms came, the dragon would lift Tom to safety above the dunes. When travelers broke down, Ash would help Tom move heavy machines back to the workshop. Slowly, the duo earned respect from people who had once feared the unknown. Tom never forgot the aliens. Their threat still lingered at the edges of the desert, a reminder that freedom must be defended. Yet he no longer felt fear when thinking of them. He knew Ash and he could face any danger together. The desert had tested them, and they had emerged stronger than ever. One morning, Tom led Ash to the highest ridge, a place where the desert stretched endlessly in every direction. He looked down at the vast expanse and smiled. "This is our home now," he said. "No one can take it from us." Ash lowered his head and let out a deep, steady rumble, his wings stretching wide. Then, with a powerful leap, he lifted Tom into the air. They soared above the dunes, the wind carrying them higher. From above, the desert looked endless, golden, and alive. Tom felt the thrill of flight, of freedom, and the deep bond between him and the dragon. They flew for hours, exploring valleys and hidden caves, discovering small oases where water gleamed in the sunlight. Ash would land carefully near them, and Tom would inspect the surroundings, repairing any damage from past sandstorms or salvaging useful materials. They were partners, explorers, and friends, living in a world they had earned together. At night, the two would sit atop a dune, gazing at the stars. Tom spoke quietly, as if the desert itself would listen. "We've survived everything, Ash. From being buried alive to fighting those aliens. And now, we have a chance to build something new. A life we choose for ourselves." The dragon rumbled, resting his massive head beside Tom. Its eyes glowed softly, reflecting the starlight. For the first time, Tom realized that Ash was not just a creature he had rescued. Ash was family, a friend, and a reminder that life was never about rules or ownership. It was about trust, courage, and choice. Weeks turned into months. The desert no longer felt harsh. Tom's workshop grew larger, sturdier, and more organized. Ash helped carry supplies, break through sand dunes, and protect the area from wild desert beasts. Travelers came from far and wide to see the dragon and meet the human who had dared to save him. Through it all, Tom and Ash remained the same. They shared a bond forged in survival, strengthened by trust, and celebrated in freedom. They were more than human and dragon. They were a team, unstoppable and free. As the sun set on another peaceful desert day, Tom placed a hand on Ash's shimmering scales. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have a whole world to explore together. No one can tell us what we can or cannot do." Ash rumbled once more, and together they turned toward the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly before them, filled with challenges, adventures, and discoveries waiting to be made. The human and the dragon, once trapped and abandoned, were now masters of their own destiny, soaring above the dunes under the golden light of freedom.